Do you ever look at booking a flight and think, whoa, that is a lot of miles? Today, we're going to show you how sometimes you might be able to book that flight for less. Keep listening to find out how. Welcome to the Travel Hacking Mom Show. We are three moms who've discovered how to leverage credit card welcome offers to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in travel expenses for nearly free. We've used credit card points and miles to take vacations to places like Hawaii, Paris, Greece, the Maldives, Italy, and so much more. And the best part? We each still have an 800 plus credit score. Imagine being able to book a vacation without having to check your bank account. It's totally possible, and we're here to show you how.
Hey, I'm Alex.
And I'm Pam, Alex's mom.
And I'm Jess. We are travel hacking moms. Today, we're talking about some of our favorite sweet spots when it comes to redeeming points and miles for flights. Many of these sweet spots are possible due to leveraging airline alliances. So first, let's go over how exactly the airline alliances work. So there are three main alliances. There is the One World Alliance, which includes airlines like American Airlines, British Airways, Qatar, Japan Airlines. There is the SkyTeam Alliance, which includes airlines like Delta, Air France and KLM, and Virgin Atlantic. And then there's the Star Alliance, which includes United, Singapore Airlines, Air Canada, Turkish Airlines, and more. I do not expect any of you to remember all of that. There's not going to be a quiz at the end of the episode. We have a transfer partner cheat sheet that we are going to link in the show notes. And that is super helpful for all of us. Even still, we all have it printed out to refer back to. But in that document, we have each of the airlines broken out by alliance and the transfer ratio and which banks transfer to which airlines. So that's going to make it super easy for you to keep track of all of that. The alliances are just important because basically what it means is that you can book flights using miles with one airline, but be flying on a completely different airline. So this is helpful if you have maybe points or miles for one airline, but you are trying to book a flight on a different airline. So as an example, you can book a Delta flight on Virgin Atlantic using Virgin Miles. This is really helpful because Delta is known for charging an arm and a leg for their flights. And a lot of the Delta miles are referred to as Sky Pesos because a lot of people think they're not worth very much. And so this is really helpful because you can save thousands of miles by booking that exact same Delta flight through Virgin Atlantic.
So one of the things that people need to remember is that you're not always going to find availability when working with a partner airline. So don't get discouraged about it, but it's always worth checking. And when it works out, it can save you a ton of money. And we're going to have some examples of that coming up. And, I've done that so many times that I am booking with one set of miles, but flying on a partner. All that happens constantly and many times at a great savings. You're going to have your best luck if you search way in advance. And honestly, I do that most of the time. But there have been times where all of a sudden I need to go visit my daughter in London and it's last minute. And that actually works out pretty good too. So my rule of thumb is last minute or way in advance. Now, I don't like the pressure of last minute, so I'm not going to do that unless I absolutely have to. I'm going to stick to trying to book as far in advance. I like to know that, yes, I'm going to get that flight, but I know that this summer she wanted me at the last minute to come help her because she was moving. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I thought, I am going to be flying economy over there. I'm not going to find something, but I was able to find a really good flight through a transfer partner. And like Jess said, we have this transfer partner cheat sheet. We love it. I use it all the time. And you can find that in the show notes.
Okay, so I'm going to get things going with sharing some of our favorite Airline Alliance sweet spots. So the first one that I've personally done is you can book Qatar Airways flights on American Airlines website with American Airlines miles. So the benefit of this is American Airlines charges less than Qatar charges for the exact same flight. So this works really good if you're wanting to go to Africa or the Middle East. When I did it, I was going, well, you can do it to or from the Maldives. I did it home from the Maldives. So this flight cost me 70,000 miles to go from Male all the way to Salt Lake City. So it's an incredible flight. If you've ever heard anyone talking about Qsuite, then you know it's amazing. They're the self-proclaimed best business class in the world. I would say that they probably are the best business class in the world that I've done. What's so nice about it is you have these little doors that shut. And so there is just so much privacy. And the seating, how it works is it's a 1-to-1 configuration, but I think it's the odd numbers. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's the odd numbers. The seats in the middle are close together. So if you're traveling with, your spouse, like I was in this case, your seats can be right next to each other. So that way, when you recline, it's almost like you're in a big bed together. I mean, you're not because you have your own seats, but they're really close together. And then if you weren't traveling with somebody or you want to be, not as close, then the other rows in the middle are a little bit further out. So it's really cool. Service is amazing. The food's good. Like it's just an overall amazing experience. And this was like one of my bucket list flights that I wanted to take. So I was super excited to be able to do it. And I'm hoping to be able to do it again someday. It's definitely like, I think if you want to go on a trip to the Maldives, then this is a great option. It just can be a little tricky to find sometimes these flights. I would highly recommend that you book it in advance and you get some American Airlines miles because American Airlines isn't a transfer partner of any of the major banks. So you're going to want to get AA miles through the American Airlines cards.
I was so bummed. One of my biggest disappointments in travel hacking was I was coming back from the Maldives and I had booked Qsuites and they did a plane change from Doha. And I got on my flight and I go, this isn't exactly what I thought Qsuites looks like. Compared to the guy that was sitting next to me because it was a 2-2 combat thing. And so I had to crawl over him. The whole time I had to use the restroom. I was in the worst mood on that trip. I couldn't over.
Mom, where were you flying to?
I was flying from Doha to Dallas. And
that's the same one I did. And this can happen. Like that's kind of a risk that can happen, with Qatar is sometimes they do aircraft changes. And if you get to be the unlucky one like my mom, then it really stinks. Do you have another Qatar flight coming up?
I do have one coming back with my sister from Israel in March. So if that one, if they do a plane switch on that one, I'm really going to be upset. But your dad and I are going back to the Maldives, and I couldn't find the Qatar flights for that with AA. I'm probably going to go back and look and see if anything has opened up and keep trying. But that flight, that is such a sweet spot. $70K to the Maldives is unbelievable. We're going Singapore, and I'm paying $143K, double that.
One way.
We could
a lot.
We weren't able to get the saver flights, which would have been less, but still not $70K. So that is one of the best sweet spots out there. And I, for that reason, always want to have some AA miles.
Yeah, the other thing that was really cool about this is a lot of times coming out of Salt Lake for myself, I have to position. So I have to fly to a bigger airport. Like when we went to Maldives, we flew to New York, stayed the night, and then left on Emirates. But what was so nice about this is, like I said, we went from Male to Doha to Dallas to Salt Lake. So the first 2 legs were on Qatar, and then the last leg from Dallas to Salt Lake City was on American Airlines. So that's the really nice thing about this sweet spot too, is when you're booking through American Airlines, they'll get you on an American flight and connect it to your reservation so you don't have to position. So that was so nice, especially when we had literally been traveling for so long. I mean, that flight from Doha to Dallas was like 16 hours. I mean, it was in Qsuite, so I'm not complaining at all. It was amazing,
Yeah.
and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
But you didn't have to crawl over
I
the
didn't have to
legs of
crawl over anybody. No, it was incredible.
I remember texting you and being like, "Are you still on the plane? Are you still on the plane?" Like, I had gone to bed, I had woken up, I had worked, and I'm like, "Are you still on the plane?" So,
Yeah, it's a long one. So, yeah, I'm with my mom, like, I always wanna have American Airline miles in case, a deal pops up with Qsuite.
How about the food on that
Yeah, it
flight?
was really
Was
good.
it amazing?
Yeah.
Did you get the donut?
Yes, they have
here comes Pam talking about the snack.
I'm
yep.
raving about it.
They had it's a Nutella stuffed donut, and it had, like, this, like,
What?
sauce on it that had, like, little apples in it. Anyways, that was the best thing for sure. I thought the main dish, it was okay. I think it was just, like, what I chose, wasn't the best thing for me, but the breakfast was amazing, and the cool thing too is you can just order your food whenever you want it. There's no, like, "Okay, now it's breakfast time and dinner time," like, you can order on demand, so that was really cool too.
Yeah, I really loved that part of it, and I just think it's so amazing that you can go have an experience in a Q suite, having this crazy food, your own little closed-in suite, and you're doing it on points and miles, and you're doing it for so cheap because it's such a great sweet spot.
Yeah, and if someone wants to see more of what that flight is like, I do have a highlight on our Instagram page where you can watch, like, what the Q Suite flight was like, if you wanna check that out. Okay, Mom, what is one of your sweet spots that you've taken advantage of?
Well, I've taken advantage of Avianca Life Miles a few times. I really like Life Miles. I mean, nobody has even really heard of it. I think it's Colombian Airline, and I'm not flying on Avianca at all. I'm usually flying on United or Lufthansa. So I flew to Greece from Chicago on a I can't even say it, Lufthansa business class. Seat, and I only paid 63,000 points for it. My sister got the same seat. She booked it through United because she had ultimate rewards, and it cost her 77K. So that is a sweet spot to me when you can actually fly on the same metal for even cheaper. And that to me is amazing. I've also used them sometimes when I'm going to Hawaii, just from Denver to Hawaii. And I'm not paying less, but I really value my United miles. I obviously value my Ultimate Rewards, and I'm not going to transfer them to United. But so if I can use something else like American Express or a different currency, then to me, that's kind of a sweet spot. So I will go from Denver to Hawaii for the same price, but using a currency that I have more of, that I'm more willing to part with. And so that's really nice. Then when we were going to go to Croatia, originally I had booked the same thing. I booked a flight on Lot Polish through Avianca for 63K, and my daughters had booked on United flying on Lot Polish for 77K. So Avianca has been really good to me. It's been really good to be able to find business class seats for less than I'd have to pay for the real airplane that I'm flying on.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, like, in this situation, you weren't flying on United, you were either on Lot Polish or on Lufthansa, but United is offering that same flight because this is an example of, the airline alliances, how they are working together. So, like this flight to Croatia, I used United Miles to book a flight on Lot Polish. You used Avianca Life Miles to book a flight on Lot Polish. You can see how these airlines are all connected to each other. The other thing I wanted to bring up too is the Avianca Life Miles site is a little weird. You're not going to go to avianca.com or anything like that. You're going to go to lifemiles.com to book award flights with them. So that was something when I first used it, I was like, how I went to Avianca and I'm like, where in the world do I find these award flight searches? So it's on the Life Miles website. So it's kind of funny that it's a different website.
A good thing to bring up because, I've done that even though I booked on Life Miles and then I go back to Avianca. I go, why does this look different? So, yeah, definitely a good thing to bring up. So, Jess has another sweet spot that we really love. So, tell us about that, Jess.
Yeah. So, like Pam, I am in a United hub. And so I'm in Houston and I'm frequently trying to find ways to fly on United without using United miles. And so Star Alliance is a huge focus for me. Out of all the alliances, I probably fly within Star Alliance the most, being based in Houston. So, one of my favorite little tricks is flying United, but booking it through Singapore Airlines. The thing I love about Singapore Airlines is that it is a transfer partner of all four of the banks. And so it is super easy to rack up Singapore miles. I find their website really user friendly. I find it easy to search for Star Alliance flights and to book Star Alliance flights. And so overall, I just find the Singapore Airlines experience to be really seamless and easy. And so I have booked United flights from the US to, well, Hawaii is the US, but the mainland to Hawaii. I have through Singapore Airlines. I have just booked domestic flights, like we fly to Chicago a lot because my husband's from there. So Houston to Chicago, book it through Singapore Airlines. The flights are not always necessarily a lot cheaper in points or miles. Like, for example, I was looking today and there were flights from Houston to Chicago on United for 15,000 miles, and the same flight on Singapore was 14,000 miles. But it's not always about getting the cheaper price. It's just I have more points that could be converted to Singapore miles than I have United miles. I don't, United is only a transfer partner of Chase. And so I don't love transferring my Chase points to United because I prefer to save those for Hyatt. So even if I'm not saving a ton of points or miles, it might be worth it for me to book through Singapore just because it's easier for me to accumulate Singapore miles. So that's why I like booking United through Singapore. There has to be saver availability with United, so it can be a little bit trickier, like Pam was saying, to find that availability. You're not going to see every United flight on Singapore's website, but if you do, it can be a good option.
The thing that I like so much about this too is with Avianca and Singapore that you both just shared about is they're in the same alliance as United, and United just increased their price of their award redemptions to pretty much everywhere internationally, it seems like. And so these partner airlines haven't. And so you can still get those flights at the lower price. But I love what you said too, Jess, about it's not just about getting the lower price, it's about which points do I want to keep and have more of, and which points can I earn more easily. So it's a really good point. So another one that works really well for me is I am in a Delta hub. And so the SkyTeam Alliance is one that works really well for me. So Delta, as Jess said, does not have the best redemptions the vast majority of the time. But I can book flights through Air France or Virgin Atlantic, or I can book Delta flights through Air France or Virgin Atlantic for typically a lot less points. So one example is I flew Delta Economy home from London and I booked it through Air France. I was on a Delta plane. Delta was charging 3 times more points on their site for this exact flight. I got it for 30,000. Delta was charging 90,000 for a one-way flight in economy, which to me is just crazy. I'm not going to pay 90,000 points for an economy flight. So this works really great for me. And it works too for domestic flights. Like my mom said earlier, it's not going to work for every single time, but I have looked into flying like Salt Lake to Orlando or even to like Cancun or Cabo. And I can find them for less than Delta's charging. So I will just search through Air France or Virgin Atlantic. And great thing is both Air France and Virgin Atlantic are transfer partners of all 4 banks. And so this is a really good trick for all of my friends that are based in Salt Lake City, all of you that are listening, keep Air France and Virgin Atlantic in your mind. And this is for me why I like having American Express miles or American Express membership rewards or Venture miles. And I can use those for these flights instead of being like, oh, I got to transfer my Amex points to Delta where I'm going to get less value. Oh, actually, I'll just transfer them to Air France where it's going to cost me less points. So I really, really like this option because otherwise Delta makes it pretty hard for you to earn enough miles for their flights.
Another sweet spot that I like a lot is using British Airways to book American Airlines and Alaska Airlines flights. It is, like we've said before, American Airlines isn't a transfer partner for many of the currencies. And so this is kind of a roundabout way to get away from that if you don't have American Airlines miles. British Airways uses a distance-based award chart, so you're looking for direct flights. The shorter the flight, the less miles you're going to pay. One of my very favorite ways to do this, I haven't done it yet. It's on my radar. I'm going to do it. I know Jess has it. And I tell people all the time, if you want to go to Hawaii, especially from the East Coast, it can be exhausting. It can take a lot of miles. And so if you can get to the West Coast, from the West Coast, from either San Francisco or LAX, you can get to Hawaii for 26,000 British Avios round trip. That's insane. That is so cheap. I mean, even, usually I'm paying for United, I'm paying $45K for one way. So that is just such a sweet spot. And so to me, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to fly to LAX. I'm going to fly to San Francisco. We'll spend the night in the hotel and then we'll get up and finish our flight. And especially from the West Coast, this is really nice. And that is one of the best sweet spots out there to me. Another sweet spot is going to the Caribbean can sometimes be hard on a lot of airlines. When I go, I usually have to spend the night on the East Coast. Well, American Airlines offers a ton of flights to the Caribbean. And sometimes you can get these for a lot less if you go to British Airways and book that flight from there. And that is a really nice sweet spot also.
Yeah, I've used the British Airways trick to book American Airlines before. I booked a flight for Mitch to go to Mitch to go to Phoenix, and it was a little bit less points than if I booked through American Airlines. And at the time, I don't even think I had American Airlines miles. So that worked really good. And then I've also done it. I actually had Iberia miles, Iberia Avios, from when my mom and I booked a flight to, from Boston to Barcelona in 2020, which obviously got canceled. Then I had all these Iberia miles. So I booked a flight for myself on Iberia, which is in this same alliance, on American Airlines to Chicago for positioning flight. So, and then I actually then moved those points from Iberia into British Airways because the Iberia website is a little clunky and British Airways is much better. So yeah, I really just love that we can find ways to book American Airlines flights without having to have American Airlines miles. Or I can be like, okay, I'm going to save my American Airlines miles for Qsuite and book something like that. And then for my shorter distance American Airlines flights, I'll just do it through British Airways, which is a transfer partner of a few different banks. So it works out.
I have used this trick so many times. I can't even count how many times I've booked American Airlines flights through British Airways. The other nice thing is that there are oftentimes transfer bonuses for British Airways. It's just one of those airlines where you can get a 30, a 40% transfer bonus, which makes it even better. I have booked this, like Pam said, to go to Hawaii. I've booked this to fly from Houston to Chicago. Chicago is an American Airlines hub, and so I've gotten great deals through British Airways there. I am speaking at the Travel More conference in November, and I'm flying into Charlotte for that. And so I got my flight, Houston to Charlotte, round trip on British Airways. There's currently an Amex British Airways transfer bonus, and so I got that flight for super cheap. So I am all about this sweet spot. I use it all the time, even though I don't live in an American Airlines hub. All right, next. So I have been wanting to go to Japan forever. Never thought I was going to be able to do it in business class, but American Airlines has an amazing sweet spot to fly on Japan Airways for 60,000 American Airlines miles, which in business class, which is insane.
Which is really crazy because that's literally like one sign-up bonus.
Yeah. Yeah. So unfortunately, I didn't have enough American Airlines miles to do both ways for 60,000, but coming home, so I'm going to Japan in January, and coming home, I am flying from Tokyo to Chicago nonstop, business class, Japan Airways for 60,000 American Airlines miles and $46 in taxes. So that is like the deal of the century. If you want to go to Japan, then American Airlines miles are a great option for doing that. Like Alex said, it's a little bit harder to rack up American Airlines miles because none of the banks transfer to them. Yeah, but if you do have the miles, using them for business class to or from Japan is an excellent way to use them.
Okay, so now let's talk about some sweet spots that don't involve airline alliances that you can just, book straight on the airline that you're hoping to fly. Mom, why don't you kick it off for us?
Okay, so one of them is Iberia Airlines. And we actually, like Alex said, had this book. So we were going to fly from Boston to Barcelona in business class, and it's only 35K, 34,000 Iberia Avios, which is crazy. Business class for 34,000 miles is nuts. And it's 17K in economy class. We were really excited about this. There are a lot of different departures that you can do this. It's primarily for going over to, if you're going to visit Spain. But I would do it in a heartbeat, go over to Spain. Maybe I'm going to actually really go to somewhere else in Europe. I'm going to go to London, or I'm going to go to Paris or something. I would do this sweet spot and then take a cheap airline like Ryanair or EasyJet to get to where I'm going. So it's really a good deal if you can find it. And it's actually pretty available. Boston and New York are the most popular routes. It's also available from LAX and some other areas. When you're going from the West Coast, it's going to cost you more in miles. And this was just a really sore spot that we weren't able to do this. And someday we need to rebook it and go. But like I said, I would do this not just for traveling to Spain. It primarily is for traveling to Barcelona or traveling to Madrid. But it's a great way to position over to Europe and then take a cheap flight to get where you really are going.
All right, next up, I am going to discuss Turkish Airlines, which I have discussed extensively in the past because I am obsessed with Turkish Airlines. So, Turkish has one-way business class flights from the US to Europe for 45,000 miles each way, which is an amazing deal. Turkish in general is an amazing airline to fly. Their food is amazing. Their hard product is amazing. Service is amazing. So, if you can find those 45,000 business promo awards, that is an amazing way to get to Europe. I've done it twice. I've gone to Athens. I flew from Houston to Athens round trip for 90,000 Turkish miles. And then in October, I am going to Istanbul. And again, I am flying Turkish Airlines nonstop from Houston to Istanbul for 45,000 miles in business class. Like Pam said, even if Istanbul is not your final destination, it is a great way to get there and then potentially use that as a jumping off point to go somewhere else. But given how amazing Turkish Airlines is, I feel like the 45,000 miles is a steal.
Do you know what? I was actually just looking at this yesterday to go for flights to Greece, and I found the 45K, but it gets me there. Like, it's not available the day I need it. It's available the next day. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe I should just go to Istanbul and then from Istanbul fly to Santorini instead of going to Athens.
Yeah.
Because the problem was it would get me there the day that I'm supposed to check into my hotel. And this hotel is not easy to book. It's the Canavas Qsuite. And so I'm not even ready to book my flights, but I was just looking for fun. So I am going to look into that, maybe just going to Istanbul.
And now I know why you were asking me if I had any trips at a certain point.
Yes.
You were priming me for babysitting.
No, I've already talked to you about that one. We already got that one. This one was actually for a different trip.
Oh,
But that one's
okay.
not working out. I didn't get too far into it. That was actually another Qsuite one I was looking into doing. But
Okay.
it was just too much work to make it happen.
You know what I love about these sweet spots is I even sometimes forget about them. And so I'm looking at, say, I'm going to go to Scotland or I'm going to go to Paris, and I will forget about positioning over there using a sweet spot. And so instead I'm paying, 70,000, 80,000 miles or points for business class, where using a sweet spot and getting over to Europe would be so much cheaper. So I need to remember to use these sweet spots more often myself.
Okay, so another sweet spot, I've talked about Air France already, but Air France is really good for even just booking Air France flights. They have some really good redemption rates to and from Europe, and they also each month have Flying Blue promos. So for example, for August, you can get flights from Denver to Paris starting as low as 15,000 miles each way, and this is good for flights through the end of March. So that's like pretty amazing, 15,000 miles to go to Europe. The other really cool thing about Air France is they have 25% off award flight prices for kids ages 2 to 11. So I think like if I'm going to go to Europe with my family, which we're going to do sometime, we are definitely going to be looking into this option with Air France.
Also, Air France is another one of those airlines that I feel like is constantly popping up for the transfer bonuses.
Yeah.
For all the banks. Like, I feel like I've seen transfer bonuses from Citi recently and Amex and Capital One. So definitely keep an eye on that because Air France already has amazing deals. And then if you can save even more with those transfer bonuses, that's a really great way to get your family to Europe for really cheap.
Yeah, I think we've used Air France a lot lately for getting to Europe. It's become, one of our favorites, and mainly because of those transfer bonuses. So these are just a few of the many airline redemption sweet spots. We hope that by seeing some of these, you can see even more the power of points and miles. And if you want to learn more about points and miles sweet spots, make sure to check out our course, Award Travel Academy Next Level, where we cover redemption sweet spots for each of the 4 major banks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Travel Hacking Mom Show. Make sure to hit the subscribe or follow button from wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. Want to start jet setting even faster? Follow the links in the show notes to learn about everything we discussed in today's episode. And to stay connected and follow along, follow us on Instagram at Travel Hacking Mom. We can't wait to see where in the world points and miles take you.